Hey, Jason Spangler, the Santee Swapper. I'm kind of excited. I just got something in the mail and I wanted to share it with everybody. This is the new book that I put together along with the help of Nathan Kohler. It's my co-author there. A little shout out to Nathan. What we did was we updated our lodge history book. And so a lot of lodges have collector guides, especially I know in the Carolinas where I live. It's become kind of popular since Blue Book has kind of died off and everyone has kind of gone to creating their own, whether it be a lodge by lodge or some people are doing like statewide efforts, things like that. What we did was we took a book that I had last published in 2010 and we updated it. Took us probably almost a year, not really a year's worth of work, but just, fits and starts, working on it for a month and not talking about it for 2 months. But we finally got it finished probably about 2 or 3 months ago, put it out there on the internet, and basically said, here it is. We're calling this the third edition of the Patch Collector's Guide to Santee Lodge 116. And the great thing about putting this book out was we got a lot of feedback, positive feedback, but also corrections. We had a lot of people tell us that, it wasn't actually this guy that designed this patch, it was this guy. I just recently had one of our lodge members who's like a real historian, sort of knows everything. He sent me a message and gave me several sort of minor corrections, but there were things that we definitely want to get right. The whole idea of writing your own lodge memorabilia guide is you're sort of setting everything straight, because we all know that in Blue Book there were a lot of errors that were baked in, and because of the nature of how the Blue Book was done, they never wanted to go back and fix any of the errors in terms of renumbering and all that kind of stuff, and some patches weren't right, whatever. So even in my lodge, which was pretty straightforward, we didn't have a whole lot of patches when the book came out in 1996, the original Blue Book. There were a couple of things in there that weren't really right, and so this book kind of sets all that straight. Now, we didn't go crazy like renumbering everything. In fact, there's one example I can give you in here where I purposefully decided not to renumber something, even though we knew back in 1996 that it was out of order, but we felt like 20-something years have passed, and so to go back and try to change that designation now would just cause confusion. And so what we've done in this book is we've updated, because this book goes into great detail, and it tells when a patch was issued. And so I can give you that example here in a minute. I'll look up that page and tell you that story, but we decided not to try to go against the grain and say, the Blue Book's wrong and we're going to renumber. We just kind of went with that. So anyways, this book is available for free. You can actually get the PDF of this book for free by going to carolinaoa.com. I think on the website it's still like the lead-off article or blog post on that website. So you can download it. It's like 35 pages, something like that. And that is the most up-to-date version that we have. But here's what I decided to do. I know that a lot of people would really rather have a printed book. Not just old-timers. I know Chris Jensen's one of those guys that will probably get one of these from me because he likes having a copy for his reference library of all of these lodge histories and reference books. I'm kind of that way too. I do a lot of stuff on the computer, but I do enjoy having a nice printed off copy. And so what I did when I felt like we'd finally gotten this third version of this book, third edition, I'm sorry, when we got the third edition kind of to a point where it was finished and like 99% correct, then I sent that to a printer that I've done a lot of business with, Brian Dalton, and Brian was able to make me these really nice, attractive, slick copies of the book. And so I have these that I'm going to be taking this weekend to my lodge fellowship and hopefully distributing those to people who are interested so that they can have a copy. So let me just kind of tell you a little bit about the formatting. This is not super complicated. I've had a few people ask me about the formatting and say, like, how did you do it? This looks so hard, whatever. Actually, this is about as easy as you can get. I did this in Microsoft Word. In fact, I have a really old version of Microsoft Word, so 2007 or something, or 2010. So this is basically a table, and we dropped the pictures into the table, and then we created lines on the table for the descriptions and the titles and those kind of things. And so that's kind of the formatting. It's all Microsoft Word. There's a footer at the bottom that we kind of use for the title. There's little headings there. It's really not a complicated format. So if anyone's looking to make a similar lodge history book, It doesn't have to be super complicated. We wanted something that we could update that wasn't going to be something really complicated. That was a mistake that I made originally when I created this book about 10 years ago, the first edition. I created it in a program called Microsoft Publisher, and I thought that was, being smart and clever, but it was a little more complicated to update it. It was complicated to print it out and to make copies, and so this one was really easy because basically in Microsoft Word I was able to create the original sort of template, and then I could easily make a PDF which is shareable, and then also of course make this version here. So let me just kind of give you this one example of something that we did which is different. If you look right here, get my fingers right, I've got this thing on reverse here, right here, that patch we call the Maritz. And so in my lodge, we call that the Maritz, and it's listed in the Blue Book as S7. What happened here was the lodge decided they needed to do a rush order for patches, and they ordered with a different company. They'd been using the National Supply Company, which I believe was Lion Brothers. They ordered from Maritz, gave them the exact same design, but the patches came back, as you can probably imagine, a little bit different, a little shorter, a little stubbier looking, and there was just one loom run of that, so we called that the Maritz. Now here's the mistake, here's the error that was in Blue Book. And I actually got a phone call from the regional editor back in 1995 or whenever he was doing this, and I told him what the order should be, the correct order, but he either didn't understand my instructions or I was going against the established grain or whatever. But here's the correct order. So this Maritz flap was actually the very first Santee Lodge flap issued with a fleur-de-lis. It was actually issued in 1979, prior to the patch that is designated as S5. So let me just read correctly here because we wrote it correctly. So this was issued in 1979, and I didn't write it in here, but I believe it came out at Dixie Fellowship in 1979. And then the patch that is really called S5, which is this guy right here, actually came out later that year. It also came out in 1979, but it came out later that year. And for a while, they sold both patches in the trading post. You could choose whichever one you wanted to buy. The one that was kind of the error, the Maritz, and then the S5, or the older deal with the fleur-de-lis, what we called it. You could buy both of them until they eventually sold out. So anyways, in the book we have the years correct. We have who designed it and all that kind of stuff. But I decided not to go in there and try to say, okay, this is the real S5, and if you do the math, then that makes the S5 the S6, that makes the S6 the S7, it just kind of gets complicated. And I decided to set the record straight, we didn't really need to mess with that numbering. So anyways, that's just one kind of dilemma that you face when you try to do these kind of books, when you try to correct the errors that Blue Book had baked into it, or with new things that have come out, you'll kind of have to make some decisions. So, and this is not going to be a commentary on where the OA Insignia Guide stands, the effort that ISCA is trying to do. I won't step into that mess. But anyways, you can kind of see what we've got here. It's all the way up to the current. That's our current set of flaps. One thing that I really am proud of is we have the designer listed for every patch. Probably about 95% of the patches in this book, we know who the designer was, and we've given them credit, which to me is like lodge history, because these designers were lodge chiefs. They were, lodge officers. Sometimes just one guy designed a patch and he never designed another one. And he was never a lodge officer or anything. He just came to a meeting with a cool design, and that sort of happened. So anyways, it kind of is lodge history. We have neckerchiefs, different sections you might imagine. We have event patches, all the event patches going all the way to the end of 2017. Then in the back, we also have some of the weird stuff. We decided to include things that really we don't want to see on a checklist. So let me just kind of address this. This has been an interesting little debate we've had. So in the very back, we have what you might call the sort of Y patches, the patches that are sort of the prototypes and that kind of stuff. And my attitude about this the whole time in talking to Nathan is, I don't want anyone to feel like they have a collection that's not complete because they don't have one of these Y patches on there. And I'll give you several examples. But so when we do a little checklist, like a spreadsheet checklist, we're not going to include these. But in the history book, we wanted to include it because it does kind of tell the story. So for example, in the Blue Book, there's a listing for my lodge. It's something like, I don't know if they call it ZS2 or ZS1 or something. I'm not sure what they called it. But in the caption, in the description, it says, known examples were burned in a fireplace. Well, there's a kernel of truth there. there were patches burned in the fireplace at camp during the business meeting when the youth voted not to approve that patch. The patch did get thrown in the fireplace. That happened. The thing about it is, though, it happened like 3 different times. And so what Nathan and I were able to do was to go back and actually find, okay, which of those flaps was actually the first one? When did it happen? And are there any pictures that survived? We were able to find pictures of all of these flaps and try to sort of figure out what year do we think it happened. Some of this is a little bit rough guessing. And then we also have some other prototype pieces here. So, for example, we pulled this one right here. This is the one that was not listed in the blue book. This guy right here, sorry, finger here. We pulled that from a copy of the Lodge newsletter. And so this flap actually was made by the Lodge advisor. It came to a Lodge fellowship meeting, and a picture of it was in the Lodge newsletter, and that flap was voted down, and the flap was thrown in the fireplace at camp and burned up. But we have the photograph, we have the photocopy from the Lodge newsletter, and that's what Nathan was able to crop and sort of doctor up and get in the book. These other 2 patches are the ones that probably the blue book was referencing. These pictures here actually came from I've dug and dug through my old files, and I found where someone had sent me pictures of these. I wasn't actually at this meeting. They took pictures of them before they tossed them in the fire. And lo and behold, something I'd really never paid attention to, but Nathan has a real eagle eye for this. There actually were 2 different prototypes. And we think that they were from 2 different companies, one from Krellman, and we think one was from another company, maybe Stadry or Moritz, we're not sure. But definitely when you see those 2, they have different designs on them. So again, we sort of feel like we're setting the record straight. What's been cool about this process for me is, with my own home lodge, I felt like I knew the stuff. I felt like I was one of the guys who was the expert or whatever, you know. But in going through this process and having Nathan Kohler work with me, he was able to question a lot of my preconceived notions about how these things happened. And as he kept asking questions, it actually made me realize that I had kind of baked in some mistakes. There were some things that I hadn't really accounted for. And so he really helped us set the record straight. So I'm very excited about that. Since publishing this, we've actually found out there's 2 more patches that need to go in this Y designated area. But we don't have clean scans of those yet to include them in. So we're going to include those later. But those are some error patches that came out on eBay back in the late 1990s. We don't think they're fakes necessarily, but they were patches that were off the manufacturer's, they were incomplete patches. They didn't have a border on them. They didn't have plastic backing. They were kind of, not rejects maybe, but just overruns that never got the border sewn on. So in the next edition, when we update this book, we'll hopefully have nice scans in there. The other kind of cool thing that happened in this was we tried to put together all of the patches that have been issued that were sort of like camporee type patches, where maybe the OA Lodge was the one who sponsored the events, and there's either like an OA symbol on here, or it says Santee Lodge on it. So a couple of these we didn't even realize. Like, I was aware, this one right here, I was kind of aware of that patch, even though it was not in the blue book. It says Chicora chapter, and it does have the arrow on it, Chicora chapter being our chapter in Myrtle Beach, Horry County. But there's another patch here that, in going through this process with Nathan and me going through patches, I sort of discovered this patch, and it was one I didn't even know about. Like, I'm not sure, it just somehow never was on my radar. And it says it's a Weebleree, 2010 Weebleree. It says Chicora District, Chicora Chapter, and has www on it. So again, the blue books, it's not like the world, is going to, notice that there's a Chicora Weebleree. But the point being that this was a patch that literally, just flew under the radar. I'm sure some people knew about it. I didn't really know about it. Nobody else seemed to, appear on their radar. So I'm sort of excited that we sort of set the record straight. There still could be another patch out there that we don't know about, that's some event patch from a district, but we think we got them all. So anyways, this book, it's 36 pages long. It's our best attempt at putting together a guide of what's out there. And if anybody's interested in this book, you can send me a message. I've got 100 copies of this printed, which might be a little much, but it was I got a really good price thanks to Brian Dalton, And so it's a nice slick book. It's you kind of see how it's made there. It's like, you know, nice wrapper on paper. It's glossy. It's really sharp looking. I'm excited. So I'll have these available also at the Charlotte Traderie. But if you want to buy one, just message me and I can send you one through the mail. We'll do it that way. But anyways, my other part for doing this video was to sort of say out there that if you don't have a book like this for your lodge, it's never too late to start. And I would really encourage everyone that, you know, we can talk about there being an OA insignia guide and, you know, ISCA and whatever. Again, not going to get into that mess. But what I would really encourage you to do is start small. Start with your own lodge and try to put together a book like this. Maybe you don't include on the first round, maybe you don't include all the weird fakes and prototypes and all the weird stuff. Nathan and I had to make some decisions. We really wanted to include in this book all of the times that our lodge hosted our conclave called the Dixie Fellowship. We wanted to include all those patches, the neckerchiefs, the mugs, all that stuff. We had some of those things together, but because my stuff is kind of in storage, I couldn't get to my mugs, and so we couldn't get nice, clean pictures of the mugs. Again, you know, the world's not going to end because we don't have mugs in this book, but hopefully with a fourth edition, this is the third edition, then we'll be able to add another layer. We'll be able to add in all of the patches from where we hosted the Dixie Fellowship. Another layer that we might eventually add, although I don't know if it'll go in a book or not, would be things like hats and T-shirts, you know, for contingent T-shirts, things like that. That stuff may live on a website. We're not really sure yet. This may just remain sort of a patch collector's guide. But anyways, you don't have to go big to kind of follow this idea and to start putting together a book. What I hope to see out of this, I hope to see not only sort of setting an example for other lodges, but I also hope to see, this might be a hope that will never be realized, but I'd love to see sort of a rekindled interest among people in my lodge and in South Carolina and in SR5 of collecting the patches from my lodge. I think my lodge is, traditionally, we've not been a crazy lodge in terms of putting out lots and lots and lots of patches. We're not on S100. I think we're on S54, I think, if I've got it right. So we haven't been crazy. We've kind of been a sort of conservative lodge and have a long tradition. So we've been around since 1938, haven't merged or anything like that. So my next project is to do a book like this for our camp, and maybe then expand that out to our council as well, to include our council shoulder strips, our jamboree issues, JSPs, things like that. So that's kind of the next goal. Maybe in 2019 or something, do something like that. So anyways, I just wanted to share this book with you. I was really excited. I picked these up today from the UPS store, and on Saturday evening I'll be going to my lodge fellowship, and actually on the schedule it says there's a patch trading session Saturday night, and so I'll have these books there and hope that some people will be interested in getting some from me. So again, this book is free. If you want to just download the PDF, you can go to carolinaoa.com, and there's a link there to download the book. You're welcome to have it. We're just sharing the information. I just took the extra step of getting some nice glossy copies made because I know that that's kind of how I would want the book rather than printing it out on my home printer. I would appreciate having a glossy cover book that I could use as a reference and as a checkbook. I mean, it's really, we actually have check mark boxes in here so that you literally could go through here and mark off what you have for your collection. So anyways, if you have any feedback for us, leave it as a comment in this Facebook Live video. I would love to sort of get that advice. Again, go check the book out. If you have some suggestions for what we could change for Volume 4, please do that. Leave that as a message. If you're one of those guys who was in my lodge back in the day and you see that we have a mistake, which we don't promise that there aren't mistakes, we've made a lot of corrections over the last 3 months, please email me those corrections and we'll try to make sure they get into the guide as well. So this isn't like, you know, a 99.9% fixed thing. It's still a little bit of a work in progress, but over the last 3 months I feel like we made enough corrections and tweaks to it that I would go ahead and spend the money and get some nice color printed copies made. So anyways, that's it. Just want to share this book with you. It's a patch collector's guide to Santee Lodge 116. That's the lodge that I grew up in South Carolina. And again, I encourage you to think about doing this for your lodge. And if you have any suggestions, reach out to me. Thanks very much. Jason Spangler, the Santee Swapper.